Wastewater Management Committee, 4th of June. Could I ask somebody to say a karakia, please? Thank you. And welcome to today's meeting. We see we've got a little short agenda here today with 3 items. We'll start off with any apologies. I don't think there are any apologies today. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. We can go to the minutes. They are on page 4 of our agenda. Any commentary around the minutes from the last meeting, which thank you to Ronald Nepe for chairing the meeting and the emergency that came up in my family. Thank you for that. If there are no comments, does someone want to move the minutes? Moved by Councillor Foster. Second by Penny Brown. All those in favour of the minutes, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. We go on to the action sheet, which is on page 9. Anyone would like any updates or any information, questions on the action sheet? If none, we'll just move on. No comments on the action sheet. We've got the governance work plan placeholder there, which we'll just leave there. Just let the minute taker know that there are no items, there are no information for agenda items 4 to 9. Nothing to report there. So we go into the reports that we have from the Chief Executive, and all our reports today are just for information. So if we go to page 12, we've got an update on the alternative use and disposal. You'll see that Council has approved the previous recommendations that came from the Wastewater Management Committee. Moved by Councillor Dowsing, seconded by Councillor Sheldrake. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions from this paper?
So through you, Madam Chair, very crucial. So those applications are very much one of the keys for us unlocking alternative use and disposal next steps on top of the budget that we already have as Council. So Council has a limited budget that we want to use as seed funding. Part of that funding is around unlocking far more funding with that. So the 75,000 is the enabler to try and get funding from the likes of the Provincial Growth Fund, Endeavour Fund, and other funding sources. Through the Chair, we're always hopeful of getting that funding. We've been in constant conversation with Wellington and our funders around any further information that's needed for those applications. So if they are unsuccessful, there are other funders that we will then turn to look for that. It doesn't mean we're stopping the alternative use and disposal. As you can see, we've moved some of the enabling things that need to happen around mortuary waste and starting to look at locations for wetlands, and those things are beginning to start this financial year coming up. So we have things in place. It's just around some of the wider studies that industry and some of our partners, in particular the report from the Chamber of Commerce that they put together, identified need for better understanding of some areas. That's what we need the funding for, is to enable some of those things to happen. So through you, Madam Chair, the timeline around the resource consent is for best endeavours to remove human waste from the bay. We're still working through what that looks like from finding an option to remove that. It's also something as part of our ongoing upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, which we'll talk to in a later paper around how we can move that waste out as quickly as possible, but it's finding a source for that is the issue for us at the same time as well. So what do we do with that recycled water once we are able to do, and that's the AUD, is that taking it to a use so that we can then look at how we would progress that going forward.
No further questions on this paper? So it's been moved by Councillor Dowsing, seconded by Councillor Sheldrake, and it's notes the contents of the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. So we move on to the second agenda item on page 18, Tūranganui-a-Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Project update. It did say in here that we're getting a... Are you online, Ian?
Yes, I am, Amber. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We're ready for you to
Great.
join in if you're ready.
How about, can you actually see me? It's probably not a good thing, but
No,
if you just got audio.
you're just on audio, is that correct? If you have a presentation,
Yep.
Ian, could you please share your screen and then we'll be able to see it?
Absolutely, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so is that coming up for you guys?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, so apologies first, I couldn't make it in person. I've got a cold, and given the current conditions, it's probably not best that I come down there. Ngā mihi tuatahi kia koe Angus mō tō karakia kia tātou, ngā mihi nui kia koe te rangatira. Nō reira kia ora koutou katoa. Ka mihi o tātou mate, tai atu rā ki tō tātou papa a Henry Lardeli. Aha ko te taia te haere ake ki tōna tangihanga nā ngā tikanga o te wā. E tangi tonu ana te ngākau mōna. Mō rātou kua ngaru nei, moe mai rā koutou. Yeah, kia ora tātou. This is an update on the work of the Kiwa Group, which is it's been carried out as mandated terms of the Tūranganui-a-Kiwa Water Quality Enhancement Project as part of the Wastewater Consent. So here's a list of the work tasks that the WMC considered previously for the Kiwa Group. It was part of the previous papers that has been approved by the WMC for the Kiwa Group to work on. These projects are going to be carried out over time. The activity that we're working on right at the moment is the wet weather discharges to rivers, which coincidentally and sadly, we're currently under a 5-day lockdown as far as overflows that happened earlier in the week. So it's a timely reminder that there's a lot of work ahead of us. So that as far as the Kiwa Group is going, we're specifically helping with Tangata whenua engagement, applying a tauranga Māori approach with a cultural lens, and working together with council to look at those aspects. And I'll be talking more about that later in the presentation. The next step is to look at separation and appropriate treatment of mortuary wastewater. And I'm pleased to say that we have a meeting set up for the 3rd week of June, where the Kiwa Group has planned to address this kaupapa. And then over time, we'll move on to the rest of these activities. But some of those will ultimately be done in parallel to other projects, but at the moment, wet weather discharges is the big problem and challenge. Okay, next slide. So for today's presentation, we're providing the WMC with an update on the current task, which is a Tangata whenua pre-consent consultation. And as we know, this is about wastewater overflows into rivers, which affect the sea also, which is why we have those two images.
Ian, can I just pause you there for a minute,
Yep,
please?
go for
We've got audio issues inside the room.
Oh.
We've got a whole lot of echo.
Okay.
Heather, how come that started echoing all of a sudden halfway through?
Is that better? Is that any better? I've got
Because it started off and it was fine and there was no echo and then it changed. Okay. Do you want to keep going, Ian, please? Thank you.
I'll just, okay. Let me know if it's not audible. Okay, so with this slide, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the tight and tactical Team Kiwa. We've had input and buy-in from all of these people representing our different hapu and iwi. They have all been included because wastewater overflows affect everyone. All of our iwi and hapu have links to the city. We've whānau living here and working in the city, and we have kids that go to school in the city, and we all use our beaches and the rivers. So everyone on this list has had input into this process, and I would like to highlight how thorough and robust the process has been. Is the audio okay, Amber? Have I got audio?
Yes, Ian, it is good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we've used this opportunity to apply the Modi compass to the different scenarios. In this example here, we're looking at the freshwater effects of the overflows to freshwater. And we have 4 scenarios. This current dashboard that we can see here is what it looks like exactly now, having recently or experiencing, currently experiencing an overflow. If we click through, this is what it looks like. This is the different attributes as they look like when we have no overflows, but under the present conditions. And this is the scenario here. We've looked at how it would look if there were reduced overflows. So the current consent is about to be applied for that reduces the number of overflows and utilising the Drainwise project. And so we can see some improvements. So I'll just rewind a bit. So present state, and then with the improvements and reduced overflows, you see some marginal improvements, especially in the Tangata whenua areas. Okay, now scenario 3, we have no wastewater overflows at all. So this is the aspirational goal for Tangata whenua, where we have absolutely no wastewater overflows. You can see huge improvements in Tangata whenua aspects or attributes, and some other smaller improvements in the environmental and kai species abundance. The catchment health, you notice, still remains very, very poor, and it's because the overflows from the pipes aren't affected. Oh, sorry, the overflows from the pipes don't affect what happens above them further up the catchment. That in itself is another major issue that needs to be addressed. So we've had a very intensive engagement process, and we're going to go through the draft outcomes of this process. The effects on Tangata whenua, we're articulating those as the practice of allowing wastewater overflows is unacceptable to Tangata whenua, as it affects them deeply, spiritually, socially, and culturally. The wastewater overflows have a significant negative effect on Tangata whenua. In terms of cultural identity, Māori, tikanga, wairua, kaitiakitanga, the practice of customary rights and protocols, and substantially diminishing or making it impossible to practice some fundamental elements of Māori society and culture. Human wastewater, particularly containing mortuary wastewater, mixing with natural water is extremely tapu for Tangata whenua. Tangata whenua consider that they have not been able to exercise their responsibility as kaitiaki in terms of the wastewater overflows into the city's rivers. And while reduction in wastewater overflows proposed by Council will improve the above, and this is considered a positive step, Tangata whenua will continue to object to wastewater overflows and seek to work together with Council with the objective of eliminating overflows. There are a number of non-wastewater issues also that affect Tangata whenua and result in negative cultural effects. These issues do not reduce any of the wastewater concerns identified through this process. They must be seen as separate issues that are all pieces of a larger puzzle and all need to be addressed over time. Okay, this next slide here, resilience personified. So here's a screenshot from a usual Zoom hui, which we began these when we were in level 4 in a total lockdown. So setting up hardware, software, and in my case, brainware from our homes had many challenges for us, which we overcame with a few laughs along the way. I'm very proud of how Team Kiwa got on with the mahi in that respect. So these are the recommendations that the Kiwa group have made. Tangata whenua need to be engaged on an ongoing basis moving forward in a meaningful, authentic, and practical manner. All possible avenues must be explored to bring forward the Drainwise implementation program, including seeking alternate sources of funding and involving Tangata whenua in those discussions. Tangata whenua should be provided with opportunities to work alongside Council to resolve these issues. Monitoring related to wastewater overflows should be reviewed to include cultural elements. Current public health monitoring procedures and locations should be reviewed. Management protocols related to dry and wet weather overflows should be reviewed by the Kiwa group, integrating tikanga aspects such as the placement of rahui and other processes. Tangata whenua need to be kept informed on the Drainwise implementation program and be given opportunities to input. Projects to improve Māori should be identified. So in this next phase that we're going straight into the separation, or looking at the separation of mortuary wastewater, and the Kiwa group will be providing Mātauranga Māori, tikanga, and Te Ao Māori input into the separation of mortuary wastewater. Kaore e kōrero I tua atu I te kōrero o tō tātou kaumātua. So here we revisit our 6th po from the cultural framework that we presented to the WMC in 2016. What do we learn from the wisdom of our elders? The importance of our spiritual relationships, our cultural relationships, to protect the Māori of Tūranga Nui a Kiwa waters, the importance of the Tūranga framework, the wisdom of land-based treatment, that soil cleanses based on that which comes from Papa Tuanuku must return to Papa Tuanuku. And the tūpapaku principle, that our deceased are extremely tapu, that disposal into any waters is extremely repugnant. The land-based treatment is the solution. Framing that another way, we previously submitted our Respect and Dignity report to the WMC, stating that treating our deceased with respect and dignity is a community goal, a goal which is healthy for our environment and healthy for our people. This is the Respect and Dignity agenda for our first meeting. The journey to now, Waia Wisconsin Mound, merging Mātauranga Māori with Western science to make sure we get an engineered solution which also meets Tangata whenua aspirations on tikanga Māori. So this is about a relationship with rangi and papa and our collective responsibilities as kaitiaki for our tupuna awa, moana and whenua. And as you, the WMC knows, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and that the journey is as important as the destination. I'd like to finish this presentation with a special mention of the mahi that Wolfgang has put into the Kiwa group and this engagement process. Wolfgang's genuine and authentic approach has built a level of trust amongst the Kiwa group, and I believe Wolf is a real credit to the Gisborne District Council. We look forward to the next WMC meeting when we can provide another update from the Kiwa Group. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Ian. Lots of information in there. I'll open it up to the table to see if anyone has any questions for Ian, what he's just presented. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, kia ora, Ian. Thank you for the presentation. You just mentioned on one of the pages here with the overflows, there's a number of non-wastewater issues that also affect tangata whenua as a result of negative cultural effects. These issues do not reduce any of the wastewater concerns identified through this process. Could you identify what those non-wastewater issues are?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So Maunga Ki Te Moana, Larry, so that's a mountain to the sea. So there are a lot of other catchment issues that have a negative impact on the catchment and on the rivers. So we're looking at upper catchment management or soil erosion, for one example. The lack or increased demand on water, so water quality and quantity are sort of two quite pertinent issues. So those things are in addition to the wastewater overflows. Okay. And like, for example, the photo I've got behind me, I probably can't see, but the three rivers, we had all that slash coming down a couple of years ago and decimated our rivers and beaches. So that's an example of another issue.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else have any more questions? Penny?
Madam Chair, mine's not so much a question, but just for the sake of the minutes, just Ray supported Ian's mihi to Wolfgang, and I'd like to join with Ray and Ian as well, and extend that thank you to Ali as well, who may have got a couple of short emails back from me during the middle of COVID. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Short
Ian, I do have one question, which was, sorry, I can't give you the page number because there isn't a page number. It was talking about monitoring related to wastewater overflow should be reviewed to include cultural elements. Is the new resource consent that may come about going forward the place you envision having that information and requirement?
Yes, I do think, I would hope that a result of this pre-consultation process, that the issues we've raised and solutions we've posed have opportunity to be embedded in the application. In addition to tangata whenua aspects, I think it might also be helpful for the wider consultation process as well.
Thank you, Ian. Wolfgang, have you got something to say? Share?
Thank you, Shannon. This is the pre-consent engagement, and we will be using this information to inform what goes into the consent application. And I can confirm that the cultural monitoring aspects will be included in the consent application.
Thank you. Are there no further questions from anyone around the table? Or Angus?
Madam Chair, I just got one. I haven't been to many who, so I'm just trying to what the Wisconsin mound's all about. Is that the alternative? Is that the mechanism that they're going to use for the, or is it like a household we're going to take out to the country?
Sure. So through you, Madam Chair, on the Respecting Dignity page there, those mounds, that's a Wisconsin mound. That's the solution that we've been working on, as Ian pointed out, since 2016 for mortuary waste. So the plan is to, that we're working through the bylaw and working through the logistics of how we would run this at the moment, is to have on-site collection of mortuary waste fluids at the mortuary. They would then be trucked out to Tarahiru Cemetery, as we've identified at this stage, for those fluids to be then put into Tarahiru Cemetery through a Wisconsin mound.
Okay.
So, yes, like a septic tank above ground, slowly drip feeds the liquid back into
The Andy. Thank you.
Sure, I have one further question, Ian. In regard to the page where it says June we start, there were two questions in your presentation. Why a Wisconsin mound and where are we at the Wisconsin mound? Were those questions for us that you wanted answers for?
No. Those questions, we're going to be addressing those. So Wolf has some technical experts. They're going to be presenting back on what they've found. So in addition to that, Murray Palmer has done a lot of good work in this respect, a lot of research, and some of his reports have been presented, and along with Ray Farmer as well, bringing that Mātauranga Māori lens to the table. So our first item for the agenda is we've got our group. We're working robustly and thoroughly. And some of us haven't encountered or been part of these discussions. So it's about bringing people up to speed on that, and then seeing are we all in the same thinking as far as what we're planning.
Okay, thank you, Ian. If there's no further questions from anyone around the table, the recommendation is that we note this report. Has anyone moved it or? Moved by Councillor Dowsing and second by Councillor Foster. Oh, sure. And this one, you mean?
Want to put your recommendations on the screen?
Right. There are pages of them, 2 pages. So do we want to
To assist the chair, I'll move and council notes the recommendations in the presentation.
just notes the recommendations? And
Just notes the recommendations within the presentation today.
So for reassurance for the committee, the recommendations that are there on those 2 pages are things that we are working with the Kiwa Group going forward. So we're quite comfortable with the recommendations that are in the paper there and acknowledge that these are things that we need to keep working with the Kiwa Group in particular going forward. So a lot of these are things that Kiwa needs to be working with us on selfishly for council around our consent application and what's going forward, but actually we're first to look for improvements in our drainwise implementation, look at how we're doing things. So a number of these will fall into recommendations for our long-term plan coming up next year, particularly things around drainwise budgets, monitoring locations. They would be things that we would look to put forward into the long-term plan for the next round. So these are things we are happy with the recommendations that are there and want to keep working with the Kiwa Group on as well.
thank you for that, Dave. I was wondering, as we go forward in terms of these presentations, it'd be really helpful if we have the presentation as our agenda and we can actually specifically refer to them in our recommendations. Would be really helpful going forward. So what I'm going to suggest is, as per Councillor Dowsing said, we will, recommendation 1, note the content of the report, and 2, notes the recommendations in the 4 June 2020 presentation from the Kiwa Group, so that we're specifically referring to the recommendations of this report.
Good.
Okay.
I'm happy with that wording for mine.
Is everyone happy with that? But going forward, it would be really helpful if we can have this presentation in our agenda, and then we can specifically refer to them without having to do an amendment such as that.
Through you, Madam Chair, what does noting the recommendations mean?
Well, that was what was moved by Councillor Dowsing. Did you want something different to noting?
I just want to be clear, these are actions that we're going to be progressing or not.
So through you, Madam Chair, a number of these are actions that we're working through with the Kiwa Group. So these are already within the project plan of work that we have commenced with Kiwa. So these are actions that we do have underway with them. We're happy to take them as things to be reporting back against.
I mean, Madam Chair, I'd like to see some measurement against these in terms of progress. So yes.
So should we put that on the action sheet to measure the progress made against these recommendations? Yep. Should we add that to the recommendation, or does that go without having to? Okay. So we will put those on the action sheet going forward so we can see regular progress against them. Councillor Foster? Sure.
Just with the overflows in the river, and you've got it's got a paragraph here. All possible avenues must be explored to bring forward the drain-wise implementation program, including seeking alternative sources of funding and involving Tangata whenua in those discussions. So, what is the ultimate outcome? Obviously getting more funding, and the ultimate outcome hopefully would be to be able to speed up this process. The only way to do that is by having more manpower and more funding, I guess, to implement it house by house. We've all seen how it actually works with the smoke testing, and it's a prolonged process. The whole drain-wise project is really involved and quite intricate. So, you know, how do you see that? What is the outcome that you're requiring for the funding, for the source of the funding? Are you wanting to be? Yeah.
Is your question to Dave, or is it to?
Yep, I guess.
Through you, Madam Chair, part of why we're happy to work with the Kiwa Group is the water reforms that are happening across the country are going to be the biggest driver that we see in the water industry, definitely within our careers, around how stormwater, wastewater and drinking water are going to be managed. That will come with different ways of operating. It will come with different regulation and legislation potentially. So part of why we need to be working with our mana whenua is to what does that actually mean for us as the region, and what are the best inputs for any type of action that's going to come from central government. And then how do we as a region respond collectively to those things? So we're happy to partner with whatever that response looks like, because we talk about future funding, but we don't know where central government's going to go with either funding or with a stick at the same time to make us do these things. So we need to be on the same page with working through what those priorities look like and how that gets rolled out would be the reason why I think it's important to leave it there.
So, there is an opportunity to be able to speed up this process and have more manpower into the drainwise project, and if successful funding is.
Through you, Madam Chair, we could speed up drainwise with more resourcing. There would also be changes that we would look to around how we consented and how we put through some of those things. As the government's just looked at different ways of speeding up RMA processes for roading and infrastructure projects, we're anticipating more of those changes should the timeframes change around us needing to get to different levels as well.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay, can I just check with the secretary there that you have noted that we're going to add the recommendations to the action sheet? Thank you. So if there are no further questions, we have two recommendations. The first is to note the content of this report, and the second one is notes to recommendations in the 4th June 2020 presentation from the Kiwa Group. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. We'll move on to the third agenda item. This is page 22. This is a paper that's previously gone to council and is now coming to the, coming to the committee for further information and to keep everyone updated with where stage 2 of the treatment process is going and the progress that is made. So I welcome any questions or queries for this paper. We also have the project manager, Drew, here, who, as you'll see, it's quite a detailed report and goes right into the details of details, really detailed version of what's happening with stage 2. Drew has a short presentation, so he'll give that to us now. Thank you, Drew. Come up here if you like. Got an echo.
Yeah, can you mute the TV?
Gonna start through and see if we can get that turned down while we go.
Yeah, we actually just turn the volume off and get it out. Down the volume button.
We are on a loop.
Right, I'm just going to give you guys a real brief overview of how do I, and then how do I switch the slide? So just going to give you a real brief overview of where we've come from and where we've got to. So the project team sort of got together in September 2019, and since then we've gone from preliminary design, which was presented to council in February this year. As you can see in the report, the cost of that was a bit higher than everyone was hoping, and we've worked through that to try and bring it down. So we were hoping to have preliminary design complete and value engineering done by March. COVID and the amount of value. Shall I just wait till that's done? It's a little bit.
Just turn it off.
Is that better? Oh, yeah. So we're hoping to have preliminary design and value engineering completed end of February, start of March. COVID sort of put a little bit of a halt on that, as well as the actual preliminary design costs. So we spent a bit of extra time working through the cost, how we can bring that down and make sure that we still meet the conditions of the consent. We've come some way along that path and we'll continue to work in bringing that cost down, but making sure we meet the consent conditions. The other part, so early procurement is a key component of making sure that the detailed design can progress, as well as fast tracking during construction. So there's 4 procurement packages. Council needs to purchase these items for the wastewater plant to operate. As part of purchasing that, we get the design inputs and the detailed design can progress. So this week or next week, just depending on some of the suppliers, they've been a bit difficult at the moment, we should have letters of award out to those contractors. So once council sign those, they're on the path of no return, basically. It's about $6 million worth of kit all up. Detailed design kicked off in May. As I mentioned earlier, it was a bit later than we'd hoped, a few delays, but we've covered a lot of ground since September and still working through that. EOI, so contractor expressions of interest are going to go out in the next month or so. So that's getting the contractor on board and into the detailed design phase to make sure that the designers don't go and do what they do, design crazy, without the contractors having some input of the best way to build it. And once that detailed design process is finished, we'll be putting that out to tender, and that's hoping to be about October this year. So here's just a basic project program of where we've come to and where we're going. Oh, I think I missed the slide here. Just take it out. Ooh, Dave's taken out the slide. Do you want me to talk about that slide or not at all? Not at all, okay. So here is basically the next steps. We'll work through detailed design, contractor early engagement. There's a variation for the consent, which is going to be applied for in September, and then tender and award and construction starting in February, completing in March 2022. Pretty much. Just wanted to give a pretty high level update on where we're at and where we're going. Council's going to organise a Wastewater 101 meeting so that all the councillors can have some more in-depth into actually how the plant works and how the whole wastewater system operates. Jeez.
The purpose of this is we'd like to make a standing update to you, a short, sharp one like that of where we're going with the project overall. We're more than happy to talk into the detail that we have for the plant and where we're at, but it's around keeping it at a governance level, but more than happy to talk around the details of how we're tracking and the things that are there. In regard to the paper that's been put forward, it is the paper that I'm sure you would have seen that went to council around the cost of the treatment plant going forward and what that looks like with some of the changes that council is looking to make around the plant, the foundations and some of the layout. So it's around those discussions, because as we get further down the detailed design phase, we're starting to have to confirm what the plant will actually physically look like, what ground conditions we're going to do, and the value engineering that you can see in the report that we've been through. So part of this is to make sure that the committee is aware that these papers have come to you formally to see what those changes are and how we're tracking through. The biggest change is obviously around the budgets, and we're working through the detailed design phase now to bring those back to council as to what happens there. We also have changed the layout of the plant and to reduce some of the costs there. And a lot of that is around not putting the plant inside. It's able to be run without being covered to look to save some costs there. So it's just around the next steps for us as we go through that detailed design. We also have, of course, put this project forward for Crown infrastructure funding as well. So we are waiting the outcome of that, which we're hoping to find out soon as to what that looks like for us as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I think for this committee, the most important piece to touch on for me is around the consent variation and just making sure that that consent variation is what we had previously identified in terms of BOD loading change. So the reduction from a design with 2 BTF filters to 1 BTF filter means that there's a technical change that doesn't make any alternative to any change to water quality. Is that correct?
So through you, Madam Chair, it's the same consent application we've always talked about. It's one of the things that we want to make sure we're really transparent with this committee and with our community about what's going to be included in that consent application going forward. So it is around the BOD loading for the wastewater treatment plant. It's around the new levels for the discharge that we will be looking to do. And under our current consent, we need to amend the consent that we have at the moment to make sure that that can be done. The other consenting issue that's sitting alongside, of course, is the designations. So with the new land that we have there, we need to make that available through a designation to be used for a wastewater treatment plant, and that process is running along inside parallel at the moment. And then there is around the consent condition of the disinfection being done by the December date, and it's around how far we're going to need an extension of time to hit that. But it is around once we have our contracts in place for the supply, our contracts in place, we will then know that hard date that we would then seek an extension for in order for that to be able to be delivered by how many months. So flagging, it's months that we're talking about, it's not years, but we need to have our supply chain completely in line, and part of that showing good faith that we have actually ordered everything and it's sent, it's just the delivery timeframes to then before we put that application in.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you. Excuse my ignorance, but can we just reiterate where we're at about the lattice flooring, which model we are running with?
I just want to check which diagram to take you to. So it's page 40 of 45 of your agenda. So it's value engineering 2.
41.
41, sorry, of your agenda. 164. One of those days. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
The lettuce.
Yeah, the lattice. So that's the one that we've taken through, that council approved us taking through to the detailed design phase.
Page 41.
41, sorry.
Are there any further questions on the, sorry, Councillor Foster?
Just with the levels of discharge, has the levels of, or the quality of the discharge changed from the original scoping, I guess? The question I'm asking is it going to be satisfactory for irrigation directly from the wastewater treatment plant, or will it still have to go through a wetland?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's the $64 million question. So part of what we're working through here is around the water quality is going to exceed our current consent requirements that we have now. So it will meet and exceed, but it's going to need to, because if you look at what's coming from a national point of view around discharges, we're going to need to make sure that the equipment we have, so we are fine. The irrigation comes down to the end users. So there are recycled water is used across the world in a number of different applications. The water quality that we have had from a human health point of view, it is very likely that it could be applied drip fed to different types of crops. We'd have to check around spraying of it, but it is something that is very close to being able to be used when it comes out. It's more around the end user and what they're going to use it for and what their market demands. So as part of the upgrade, one of the things that we should highlight actually is we have increased inside the project the ability to reuse the water ourselves on site. So we're talking about reusing the water that we are going to have coming out the end for cleaning of the grit screens and cleaning of the wastewater treatment plant. So it'll be that clean that we will be using it to clean our equipment with. So it is quite a high quality, but part of that is council walking its own talk about if we're trying to get people to use recycled water, we should be using it too. There's also significant cost savings for council by not using potable water. So it is something, it always comes down to the end user and whether or not they're prepared to use it at the level of treatment that we'll be providing it.
Thank you.
Angus, sorry.
Just sort of add to that. So is council looking at a pilot scheme of some, like leader brand? Or, you know, one of those users as a trial?
So through the chair, one of the things we're looking for in the AUD is through that funding is to set up some trials to actually see what they could look like. So our provincial growth funding application that Wolf can talk to is very much about getting seed funding to try how this would look with partners to actually say, well, let's try some crops. Let's see what happens with it. What does that look like for us?
Thank you.
Leroy?
Yeah, my question is going back to irrigation is there any standard that's required for water that's supplied to irrigators? Because my quick look at the last paper on irrigation is reference to what the quality of that water needs to be. So if we're able to supply it, do they then have the choice of taking treated water out of the system or recycled water? Or is it possible that we say, well, here's the water that's available for irrigation?
Through you, Madam Chair, when it comes to water for irrigation, there are a number of public health factors that we need to make sure we have got completely covered off, which we're looking to do as part of the work that we've done with Becca, but then also ESR around what is left in that water and what are there, if any, health risks. Part of the irrigation is very much us showing that we can have it. As part of the design has space to bolt on, for a crude term, a pipe to then take it off to wherever we would like it to post-treatment. So part of what we've done with that future proofing is there is a T-junction that is there to be able to move the water exit stage right if we need to, once we have a use for it. So it very much is working through what those options are through that AUD program to then be able to enable that in the future once we have something that we're able to support.
So has there any discussion been had with that irrigation group as to their thoughts around using the recycled water? Because it's a massive take, and certainly from an iwi perspective, it's like if we're saying we don't necessarily have enough to supply for drinking water, but we're going to use drinking water for other purposes. So yeah, what's the feedback or what's the thinking of that irrigation users group?
We've talked to a number of users or potential users, and we're yet to have anyone who will commit to taking that water in the volumes that we're after. A lot of it comes down to their supply agreements for where that is going, for international markets and concerns about that. And I know Councillor Sheldrake was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, where there was a lot of work done again with irrigators to try and find a use for it. The AUD programs, I suppose, to answer those last remaining questions that a potential receiver of that water needs to overcome in order for us to be able to move that water towards them for them to use on irrigation. But a lot of people are interested, but the devil's in the detail of how we actually work through the use of it, what's the impact on their market, how much can they take, all of those kind of things is normally where it starts to go a little bit cold.
So it works out. Through the chair, we have an engagement plan that the chamber helped produce for engagement with irrigators, and we're looking to roll that out next year, next financial year. So we're in June, July, we start looking at that.
Are there any other questions from the table? Sure, Drew, sorry.
So can I just sort of give an overview, I guess, of where the AUD is at? The water that comes out of the treatment plant could potentially be used to irrigate. That would be through drip line and may have to be under the soil, under the top layer of the soil. But again, this AUD is all around perceptions, and council has a big task ahead of itself getting those perceptions sorted. So to irrigate onto things like lettuces and leader brand, at the moment it's a no. It wouldn't be able to do that. Obviously, when you're irrigating directly onto a crop and then you're eating that crop that's had the irrigated water on it, it's different to if you're putting it underneath the trees and you're taking the, you know, the fruit or something off it. So there's different levels of recycled water. Some of it at the moment has the potential to be used, but not all of what we're generating. And that there's a big perception out there that, hey, it's wastewater and we need to change that from it's a resource. We don't have a lot of water out there now. How can we use what we've got?
Thank you, Drew. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the paper, and just on the point of the AUD, in that first paper we identified we've got $725,000 to do that research and to start tackling those challenges. That's specifically for the paperwork and to try to get over some of these hurdles, and then we need to get the commercial aspect of it off the back of that work.
Yes, Ronald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Barry Palmer presented a report at our last meeting. So has that been part and parcel of your discussions with irrigation groups? Are they aware of all that information and international trends?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've talked with them about international trends for a while around how it's been used in other places. It's around their market sensitivities for a lot of them that they're not willing to overcome until they're just not there yet.
So did they get that report that Ronald is referring to?
So through you, Madam Chair, we haven't sent it to them directly since we got that report.
Okay. No, sure,
I
continue.
think it'd be just good to, if we can get an impression from the group around the level, the expectations around quality.
So we can have that, can we have that included when saying in the new financial year, the irrigation group will be? Sure, thank you. Penny.
Sorry, Madam Chair, is there an irrigation group? And
was
am I on
gonna
it?
And who are they?
So through you, Madam Chair, it's something we're looking to start in the new financial year of bringing the big water suppliers that we have that have an interest around their protection going forward. So we haven't got everybody in the room yet. It's something to kick off in the new financial year once we have the resourcing to pay for it.
Any further questions regarding this stage 2 update and irrigation? Second by Ronald Napier. If there's no further questions, I'll put the recommendations forward, which is just to note the contents of the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And that's the last report on our agenda. There are no further items, so I will close the meeting.
The conversation keeps coming around to the same thing on AUD, and it's what our expectation of the water quality will be when it comes out of the treatment plant and who might use it. And we did identify in that previous report from Murray around some Australian standards of ABC grade, I think it was, and it'd be nice to know what our expectations are, where we may sit against some of those international standards. I don't know if it'd be good to just know what level.
Through you, Madam Chair, would you like us to put it, we're happy to put that on a paper for the next committee meeting?
That'd be great.
The committee happy with that to receive their report?
Just wondering, wouldn't that sort of stuff be managed by Kiwa?
So through you, Madam Chair, happy to have Kiwi's input into, there's a, as with all things with wastewater, there's a scientific view, then there's a tangata whenua and tikanga perspective on that same water. So happy to have their input into how that water quality and their version of what it looks like.
Just from memory again too, Madam Chair, the paper that Murray presented, he did do some analysis of other Indigenous examples throughout the world as well.
Yes. Yes. Yes, so we will put that on the action sheet. Thank you. So Wolfgang, you'd like to add something?
The Tangata Whenua component is on the Kiwa Group action list already to look at.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you, Angus.